Hello friends, welcome back to my channel Mukesh English, and this is Mukesh Soni. Friends, in this video we are going to analyze a very interesting essay, the very famous essay titled The Sporting Spirit by George Orwell. George Orwell is known as the famous British novelist, essayist, and the poet. And this essay, The Sporting Spirit, was first published in the magazine Tribune on 14th December 1945, and later it was republished in the another we can see in the another book of essays, Shooting an Elephant and the Other Essays in 1950. So before we go through this essays, I have few questions that I would like to know those questions answers from you as well as from that essay. So my very first question is here: have you ever felt a strong emotional reaction while watching or playing a sports match? How did it make you feel toward the opposing team or players? My question number one. And the second question is here: in your opinion, is it possible to fully separate sports from politics and from nationalism? Then, do you think that the media's portrayal of sports events contributes to the nationalistic feelings? How might this impact how people view international competitions? Next question: have you seen or experienced any examples where the fans behaved very aggressively during a game? And the last question: what do you think is the main purpose of international sports events like the Olympics or the World Cup? So these are the questions I have in my mind, which you need to solve these questions answers after going through the essay, The Sporting Spirit. So let's go through this essay. What is this essay about? So we have an introduction here. George Orwell begins the essay by challenging the widely accepted idea that international sports create goodwill between nations. But instead of this, he also argues that sports often fuel hatred and hostility. He says that sports brings hatred and hostility among the nations or between the nations. He acknowledges that people generally believe international sports even foster peace, but he disagrees. He claims that such competitions instead intensify national rivalries. Next opinion: he introduces the recent visit of the Soviet Dynamo football team to Britain as an example to support his claim, suggesting that their matches actually worsened Anglo-Soviet relations. So what he means to say that he says that he does not agree with the opinions of the people, where the people says that if a two nations are going to have an international match, international sports, and that match will bring a peace. He says, no, such kind of matches is going to intensify the national hatred, the national rivalries, and this is going to become another nationalism or the nationalist point of view. So let us try to analyze George Orwell's famous essay, The Sporting Spirit. The very first point we are going to discuss here: the examples of conflict during the Dynamo team's tour in 1945. Dynamo, the famous team for the football, soccer, and which visited Britain in 1945. So George Orwell uses a specific incidents from the Dynamo team's tour in Britain to show how sports can provoke conflict. He mentions the fights that broke out on the field and the disagreements over the team's compositions, revealing the tension that overshadowed the matches, and that also brought an influence on the other matches. Each side, either it's the British or the Soviet, they interpreted events according to their own political biases, which brought the disagreement on whether the British team was fully an all England team. This shows how political undertones influence people's reactions to sports. Each group see the things from the nationalist point of view, and this will worsen the relationships, rather promoting the understanding. So that is the example of the conflict during the Dynamo's team's tour to Britain in 1945. The second key point is here. You can just have a look at the team's visit in 1945 and these pictures, these images. It really it shows that how it has brought a very negative impact. So let us see the next important point. Sports as a mimic warfare. How sports has been considered as the mimic warfare. So George Orwell introduces the idea of competitive sports as the mimic warfare, where nations compete with the same intense pride and determination as they would do in the actual conflicts. How? When the national pride is at the stake, players and the fans focus on winning at all cost, at any cost they want to win. And the sense of fair play is overshadowed by the desire to see one's country come out on the top. That means to say the competition, the healthy competition will not be there. There'll be the only the competition to win and to bring its team's country on the top, and that's going to create a conflicts, that's going to create the rivalries among other between the nations. George Orwell would like to say that competitive sports are not simply friendly contests, but are instead filled with combative emotions. As the teams represent their countries and their victory or defeat feels like a reflection on the nation itself. If any country wins, it's going to create a different image of the nation. If the country is getting defeated, again, it's going to create a different image of the nation. So like this competitive sports, they are not simply friendly contests. They have become like a combative emotions, like a kind of war, a kind of warfare between the two nations. Then the next point we find here, what is the role of spectators? How the spectators are also involved to bring out such kind of combative emotions among the nations or the between the nations. How? Now, George Orwell, he's going to turn his focus to the spectators, the audience who is watching the match. Here, George Orwell believes that the spectator plays an important role in intensifying the rivalries, dushmani, grana among the nations, between the nations, the crowd's emotions, which convert cheers to insult, which show how deeply invested they are in their own team's success. So one moment we find that they show a cheer up, that same cheer up turns into the insult of the other team. The spectators often lose control, booing opponents and try to unnerve rival players, which can lead to an increase of tension and anger on both the sides, which we have seen in many of the international matches like football or sometimes even India, Pakistan, or the India, Australia. I remember when India and Australia they used to play the cricket match, and there used to be a lot of verbal fancy, and how the spectators used to hoot, they used to create the kind of tension among the players. So according to George Orwell, spectators see the success of the team as a reflection of the national pride, and such passion leads to the hostility surrounding international sports. So that is the role of the spectators. Second key point from this essay we find here later, you can just have a look at, these are just the examples of the images where the crowd also plays important role, the spectators also play important role in intensifying the rivalries among the or the between the teams. Then next example, next key point we have here, what is the historical context and which are the examples do we find? So, to strengthen his argument, George Orwell refers to historical examples where sports led to or heightened international hostility, where the degree of international hostility can be seen at the greater level. He gives an example of the 1936 Olympics in Nazi Germany, where Hitler used the event as a showcase of German superiority and turning into a nationalistic display. How Nazi Germany, Hitler had used this kind of sports as a weapon to show to the other nations, look how superior am I. And this has turned the whole competitive spirit, the sporting spirit has turned into the nationalistic display. So it has taken the political color. He also refers to the conflicts in cricket, such as the controversy over bodyline bowling between England and Australia, which led to anger between the two countries. So these examples emphasize that sports are often politicized and that competition can escalate into nationalistic disputes, even in traditionally gentlemanly games like cricket. Yes, we have seen, I don't want to name here the team's name here, we have seen many times that how the cricket match turns into a political match. So we have few images here of 1936 Olympic Games, where how the Nazi Germany, the Hitler, has politicized the Olympic Games to show the superiority over all other nations. So the next key point we find here, critic of modern obsession with sports. So George Orwell, he explores the history of the competitive sports obsession, finding that idea of sports as a high stakes national competition only gained prominence in the 19th century, especially in Britain and the United States. That means to say in 19th century, sports have become a great, sports used to be given more importance as a national competition, especially with reference to the country like Britain or US. Then previously, what used to happen? Previously, games were played more casually without the nationalist point of view. In fact, George Orwell has noted down Dr. Arnold's opinion, where Dr. Arnold, a famous British educator, he mentioned once saying that he mentioned sports as a mere distraction and did not encourage this competitive obsession in schools. He said, no, this is not going to encourage any kind of competitive obsession in school, according to Dr. Arnold. He argues that George Orwell argues that this obsession was built up into a heavily commercialized and nationalist pursuit, where sports were seen as representations of a nation's strength, contributing to a culture of intense competition. So later we can see that so many commercialized point of view of such sports, like today we have IPL, etc., and the other matches we have. So they are trying to bring up more intense competition, and that intense competition is not a healthy competition, and such competition is going to bring up the rivalries between the two nations. So that is the critique of modern obsession which we have with the sports, according to George Orwell. Next key point we find here, linked to the nationalism and urbanization, how the sports are going to bring up a link between nationalism and urbanization. So George Orwell, he connects the rise of competitive sports to the development of nationalism and urban life. So in cities, people had less opportunities to energize naturally. So what do? They developed organized group of activities like sports. They start to have some clubs for different sports. But he contrasts this with the rural life, where people could find natural outlets like walking, swimming, outdoor activities without the need for any competitive games. So the rural communities had a more relaxed approach to sports, focusing on play rather than national prestige. So overall, we can find here George Orwell suggests that urbanization combined with the rise of nationalism has led people to identify with power units, which is the power units, nations, and see sports as an extension of the national identity. So today, the sports has become a tool. Sports has become a weapon to show their power, to show their identity rather than the other things. They show that yes, this country is good in sports, this country is good in cricket, this country is good in hockey, like soccer or football, because they have showcased their sports not in very healthy competitive spirits, but as a kind of the spirit as a kind of like nationalistic point of view. So now the next key point we find here, 1 minute. Yeah. Imagining the potential conflicts. Which are the potential conflicts we imagine here? So George Orwell creates a hypothetical scenario to explain the potential dangers of using sports to build international goodwill. He imagines what might happen if highly polarized nations like Jews and Arabs and or Russians and Poles, they played against each other in front of large mixed crowd. He says that just imagine if all these countries, if all those people, if they play together among the all the crowd, what is going to happen and how will it affect? So such matches would likely deepen the hostilities rather than mend them. As fans, the fans would be emotionally invested in the team's victory as a matter of national pride. So what's going to happen? It's going to create more hatred, more hostility feelings among the fans of two or the other teams. So here, George Orwell believes that sports often inflame tension. It brings tension, especially between the countries which already have the conflicts, and that sports are not an effective solution for easing the international rivalries. Next key point we find here, advice, the last key point from this essay. What's the advice here? Advice on international sporting events. So what is the advice of George Orwell on this keynote or on this point of view? The very first advice, George Orwell suggests that Britain should avoid escalating tensions by sending its own team to the Soviet Union. However, they really want to send, then they should send second-rate team which can minimize the competitive stakes and will also avoid to frame such sports as a representation of the entire nation. Simple thing, why do you send your excellent team? Send some average team so such kind of feelings will not appear, such kind of rivalries will not appear. So that is the suggestion by an advice by George Orwell. His second recommendation reflects a cautious approach as he recognizes that the intense emotions around national teams can lead to political and social repercussions. Repercussions. So that is also going to bring a kind of spark in the politics or in the social life. Then, finally, by suggesting a less competitive team, George Orwell hints that when sports are removed from high stakes nationalism, they can be less divisive. So let's not send such kind of teams which bring a kind of hostility. Let's send an average team so that we can minimize this rivalry and we can bring up the sporting spirit. That is the advice of George Orwell on the international sporting events or on the international platform. So while going through this important essay, I found here three important sports which are mentioned here: football or soccer. So George Orwell uses the visit of Soviet Dynamo football team to Britain in 1945 as a main example of how international matches can cause tension and hostility. Then second, sports which has been employed here, cricket. George Orwell discusses the body line bowling controversy, which led to the disputes between England and Australia, showing that even cricket, often seen as a gentleman's game, which can also provoke intense rivalry. And the third one is here, boxing. He describes boxing as the most brutal of sports and mentions the hostility that can arise, especially in fights between boxers of different races before a mixed audience. So finally, we can say here, what's the conclusion? George Orwell concludes by reinforcing his view that competitive sports closely tied to nationalism encourage rivalry, anger, and resentment rather than unity and fair play. Sports could likely be about enjoyment and friendly competition, but nationalism has turned them into contest for national pride, resulting in an environment more reminiscent of war than peaceful interaction. George Orwell's closing remarks challenge the reader to rethink the role of sports in society, questioning whether the nationalistic focus on competition is beneficial or if it merely fuels unnecessary hostility. So he says that is it really required such kind of sports which is going to bring up the nationalistic focus, or it's fueling the unnecessary hostility. So what is the required here, what's the requirement is here? Sporting spirit, which has nothing to do with the politics, which has nothing to do with any kind of individual remarks, which shows only healthy competition, not the rivalry. So friends, find out the difference between rivalry and the competition. Both have different context, both have different meanings. Then you will be able to understand this important essay by George Orwell, The Sporting Spirit. So, friends, I have tried my best to simplify this essay. Definitely, most of you would say, Sir, why are you reading the lines? Let me tell you, I have simplified it, so it's better. I thought let all the content be on screen so that you can go through it. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have liked. I hope you have liked this video. Click on the like button. If you're not yet subscribed my channel, click on the subscribe option. Subscribe it. You'll be getting a lot of other videos, summary, question answers in the days to go. And if you have any questions, any queries, you can mail me at mukeshenglish@gmail.com. Thank you so much. Be in tune. Be stay connected with Mukesh English.